Welcome to the Helicopter Podcast, your go-to source for all things rotorcraft. I'm Halsey Schider, bringing you the stories, insights, and conversations from around the helicopter industry. Whether you're a seasoned pilot, a maintainer, or you're just passionate about helicopters, this is the podcast for you. Okay, guys, welcome to the Helicopter Podcast and the Hangar Z Podcast mashup, brought to you by Vertical HeliCASTS in partnership with Vertical Magazine. Really excited about this mashup, guys. This is a two-part series that we had the opportunity to sit down and talk with the president and CEO of MD Helicopters, Mr. Ryan Weeks, co-hosted by John Gray of the Hangar Z Podcast, second best helicopter podcast on the internet, if I say so myself. Just playing, John. Love you, buddy. Also joined by Brent Bundy. He retired Phoenix Police Department pilot. Super cool dude. And he's a longtime correspondent of Vertical Magazine. So it was really fun to have not just me and John, but also Brent. He's actually got to go out to MD recently and do some cool stuff. So fun to have him on the conversation. Man, we talked with Ryan about so much stuff. Man, Ryan is such an impressive guy, has such a diverse background. Ended up kind of working his way through his career, always took advantage of opportunities. That was kind of a staple and a message throughout this podcast of just like, hey, being flexible and saying yes to opportunities. He ended up going into work for Textron Bell. That's where he got his helicopter kind of experience, his foundation. Ended up at Honeywell for a little bit in 2022. He came into MD to help with, aftermarket supply chain issues and things like that. And now he's actually the president and CEO. We also talk about all the exciting things that are happening at MD right now, like some of the new STC modifications for the 520N. They're calling it the 530N, so you can upgrade with a C30 engine. The Super D that's coming out. And then some other little teases, D to F, things like that. Super cool. So make sure that you tune in to this conversation. This was so much fun. And actually, this podcast was recorded on October 21st, and at that time, the FAA had not yet approved the STCs associated with the Super D. 3 days after we recorded, the FAA actually approved the Super D with the C20B. So super cool. So we're talking about it during the podcast, and then just a couple days after we were actually notified. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Peace.
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is fuselage. Visit contest.verticalhelicast.com to enter the buzzword.
Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of my conversation. Now, if you're like part 2, but I didn't listen to part 1, super easy fix. All you have to do is go back to last week's episode and check out part 1. It's an amazing conversation. And then you come back to part 2 here. Easy solution. Check it out. Cheers.
Sure. So the 530N, that's kind of one of the, I'll call it the easier upgrades. And, if you haven't heard the story, or the world hasn't heard the story before, back in 1989, when that product was conceptualized, and go back further than that, the Hughes helicopter company came up with the NOTAR concept back in 1975. That's how long it's been around. They also basically designed and won the Apache program. So I like to remind people that the Apache is not a Boeing product. The Hughes helicopters team developed the Apache. And if you're also not aware, the 5-bladed rotor head on the 500 series is a miniaturized copy of the Apache head because it all came from the same roots. So I went a little off track there, but back to the 530N. So in 1989, when that product first flew, MD tested it with both the C30 and the C20 engine. And it was actually the 530N that flew first in 1989. A decision was made to go with the C20 engine. And, the aircraft went into production in 1991. And as you guys probably know, its Achilles heel was its ability to perform in hot and high conditions. So, nobody knows exactly why we went with the C20 instead of the C30. Some people say it's because the people in charge at the time thought it might cannibalize F model sales. But, back to my point about cannibalization. If you got to be willing to do it yourself sometimes, or somebody else is going to do it. And as a result, we didn't sell nearly as many of those aircraft as we thought we would. Today, there are only about 85 of them, out in the field with fleet. So this particular upgrade gives it significantly better high performance. And in the article that Brent put together and Vertical released within the last week or so, we shared a couple of data points in there, and I'll reshare them here. So on a 45 degrees C or 113 F day, the 530N can hover in ground effect at 1,100 feet higher pressure altitude than the 520N. Or maybe to change that a little bit and talk weights, on that same day at sea level, the 530N can carry 290 pounds more than the 520N when hovering out of ground effect, or reduce the temperature a little bit to 35 C or 95 F. The 530N can carry 210 pounds more than the 520N between 2,500 feet and 5,200 feet pressure altitude. So significantly better performance in hot and high conditions. And Brett can elaborate on kind of one of the intangibles that he experienced when he flew that aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely. As and as Ryan's also where we, Phoenix Police Department, we bought in 1991, we bought the first 7 MD520Ns that rolled off the assembly line, and then we bought 2 more later. We eventually had a fleet of 9 of them. And some of the numbers you throw out may seem not reasonable to a lot of people when you're talking 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, in Phoenix, that's a normal summer day.
So that's cold in Phoenix.
Yeah, it is. Actually, you're like, it only got to 113 today. It'll be a nice day to fly. And, there was a lot of my career was spent flying nights, but we would have nighttime lows that didn't drop below 100 degrees. So to hit 115, 117 during the day, it was not abnormal. And flying from one side of the city to the other on a 115 degree day, you didn't, John, you know how it is. You don't let the jacket indicate it too much. Even when you're doing orbits, it's just kind of, you get a feel for it and everything. We may look at different gauges than people do in other operations, but in those NOTARs, in those 520 and with the C20 engine back in the when I was flying them in early 2000s, there was one gauge you looked at, and that was a TOT. You were almost always TOT limited in those high temperature operations. So in my time flying the 530N just recently, I've flown many models of aircraft since my time in the 520N, but as soon as I got back into that seat, it felt like I was back in my patrol days. And I mentioned it to Mike and Dennis, the pilots there with MD who I was flying with, that it was an instant, just a muscle. There's a lot of muscle memory in aviation. You rely on it. And my muscle memory, having not been in a 520 in years, my eyes automatically went right back to where that TOT gauge is, because that's what I was used to looking at. And we didn't, I was hoping we were going to have a really hot day the day I was flying, but we had some temperatures the day I was flying the 530N recently, and it almost made me giggle just looking down at that TOT gauge, and it wasn't even close. I mean, we were pulling some good power out of it, pulling some maneuvers. Mike and I were pulling some maneuvers out over the deserts there north of Falcon Field, where MD's located in Mesa there, and never once did TOT become not even a concern, but not even an issue. It was an afterthought. And that was, to me, that was proof of concept of what I experienced in my many hours flying those, to see the new one. And again, people may right off say, well, this isn't as big of an upgrade as the Super D20B. Well, no, it's not. But for the limitations that the 520N had, again, like I started at the beginning of this today, the wish list was that C30 engine. And Ryan, I think you were correct. I think there's rumors back when we were testing to be the launch customer for the 520N. I believe some of the test aircraft that we flew were equipped with the C30 back then. And there's also some rumors that we were expecting the C30, and then it showed up with the 520. It might have been what they wanted, but it did the job for us very well for many years. But there was always that issue. There was always that concern. Hey, it's a hot day. stand by. It's, if we can hit 100 knots flying across the city today, we're going to be happy. And that wasn't always possible with the 530N. Now that eliminates that. And I saw that firsthand flying it in the deserts or in the heat just recently. And it's not a false promise. It's there. And I've seen it firsthand.
Something that I was surprised about in reading the article was the fact that it was essentially an upgrade to the NOTAR aircraft or the platform. And Ryan, I agree. I think the NOTAR is, well, I don't know if you said it, but you pretty much said it because talking about the just the lifespan of the NOTAR. But I think it's one of the coolest things. I remember as a little kid being on a boat in my hometown, and I looked up and I saw a helicopter fly over, and it didn't have a tail rotor. And my mind was absolutely blown. I'm like, what is going on? I thought I was seeing things. I mean, this is like a visceral memory that I have. So, one of the questions that I asked your predecessor when I podcasted it, and this is why this was surprising when I read this article, was I asked essentially, his thought of the NOTAR at that point. And, what MD, if MD had plans of, continuing to support or maybe innovate around the NOTAR. And that was a couple of years ago. And at that time, the answer was really no, that there wasn't many plans, and, they would support the fleet the best they could, but there wasn't going to be much innovation around the NOTAR. Now with you in this position, is that changing? Is there a different ideology at MD specific from you regarding the NOTAR itself?
I think so. I have a little different perspective on NOTAR, and Brad Peterson, he worked with it for many, many years, long before I was around. So, he also has a lot of experience with it. But two things that, anybody and everybody can say about the NOTAR is it's the quietest tail rotor system there is. And when on the ground, it's the safest tail rotor system there is too. So in terms of quiet, I don't have any hard data handy, but if you've ever been around a NOTAR aircraft, it's simply different, especially if you watch a 902 take off. To watch a twin engine aircraft take off and just the way it sounds or doesn't sound, it's almost bizarre. So, as I don't know if we talked about this earlier, but with the growing attention to noise pollution, there are many people, including Aaron Smith of Prince George's County, that will tell you, the NOTAR tail system should, be something that you guys can get a lot of mileage out from, an environmentally friendly type of standpoint. And then from a safety standpoint, many accidents on the ground involve the tail rotor because it's low, it's obviously dangerous, and it's, it can be hard to see. So no shortage of accidents that have happened with people and literally dogs. And this happened on a Bell 407 at one time. They get into the tail rotor and, it can be fatal, of course. So with NOTAR, you completely eliminate that risk. And especially on the 902 with the bay doors in the back for loading stretchers, you don't have to worry about anybody getting into the tail rotor. So yeah, some significant benefits there. Now, there are those that will tell you it's not quite as responsive as a conventional tail rotor from a flying standpoint, but Brett and others will probably be the first to tell you once you get used to it, you can effectively maneuver that aircraft however you want. So
yeah, I don't see any issues there. Again, maybe some minute issues, but yeah, you're exactly right. You get used to that, and it really doesn't feel any different than anything else. And to your point, Brian, on the noise, when we switched to a different maker for Phoenix PD, I don't have exact numbers, but I've been told that our noise complaints were as much as tripled as what they were almost overnight. Wow. Everybody was used to hearing, what they said, the vacuum cleaner flying overhead, and it wasn't even at lower altitude, flying at 400, 500 feet AGL over neighborhoods in the middle of the night. We just didn't get a ton of complaints. And then also to your safety issues is, we have a desert, we don't have a lot of trees in the desert, but those times they're doing operations out in the desert and you would back that tail into some scrub, into some brush and stuff. And yeah, you don't want to scratch the thing up, but that was about your only concern. You're not going to, your tail or isn't going to get hooked into anything. And there's even a video from during the testing program where they dropped that tail down into some water, into a lake, and brought it back up out of it. And because as you pointed out in the video, Ryan, 60% of your anti-torque is based off that Quanda effect, the airflow around it. It's not just you're thinking dipping that tail down into the water with that exhaust vent there for the fan. Well, that's not the majority of your directional control. So it can go into trees. It can go down into the water, and it's not. I would recommend dipping it into water on a regular basis, but it proved that it can be done. And so that there is nothing as safe out there. Even if you're looking at a Finistron equipped aircraft, there still is the potential for things, people, dogs, whatever, to get into that Finistron. It can happen. Whereas with the NOTAR, that only fan is so far up into the fuselage that it's not an issue for the danger of it. And then the noise signature alone is worth it.
I'm a pilot, so sometimes I ask stupid questions. I'm not an engineer. All the time. Let's be honest. And so, if this sounds dumb, then I apologize in advance. But I'm guessing my listeners might also kind of be curious about this. So, I find it fascinating that the aircraft was originally tested with the C-30. I think that's funny, really. And so, I guess my question is, was it certified with the C-30? And what is it now? Like if I say I had the 520N and I want to upgrade now to the 530N, how is that? Is it through an STC? Is it through service instructions? Again, these are probably questions I should know or answers I should know, but I'd like to hear it from you of what that looks like, of just from like the actual legality standpoint of how you're legally installing now this new engine into the aircraft.
Okay, yeah, the mechanics of it. And I was cleaning off the desk behind me yesterday, and I didn't pull this out just for this meeting, but here's a test report from July 31st of 1989. And this was goes into some detail about the 530N that we literally flew. So
really cool.
Kind of crazy.
That's a piece of MD history right there.
Yeah, it is. So how we do this is, and it'll be a combination of either supplemental type certificates that we get through the FAA or technical bulletins that we can issue as an OEM to do these upgrades. So with the 530N in particular, we're securing an STC supplemental type cert through the FAA. And the way that dance works, for anybody who's not terribly familiar with it, is we basically write up a test plan and a game plan for certifying this upgrade to the product. We submit it to the FAA, they approve it, and I'm giving you the 30,000 foot view. And then we start company testing, and we conduct a bunch of tests that they said, yeah, you need to do these tests to verify that it does all these things. We'll do the company level testing in different environments, and then we turn in the test report to the FAA, and they have 30 days to look at and decide whether they want to do any additional test, or they want to repeat any of those tests, as well as do a sound test at this airfield out in Bakersfield, California. And MD works through the LA, Los Angeles CERT office. So they take time doing that. And then we schedule the TIA test, as they're called, and we meet the FAA folks out at that airfield, and we'll repeat some tests and or do the sound test. And then we submit the final test report, and they have 30 days to go through it. There are different, branches, and take a look at it and make sure everything's up to snuff. And then they eventually certify it and give us an STC. So what we do in the meantime, and what we're doing with the 530N, is we basically create a kit, and we will sell this kit to our service centers around the world. And we have about 35 service centers and right around 5 parts retailers who they not only buy and install the parts themselves, but they're all authorized to sell to FAA Part 145 repair shops or equivalent around the world, because we can't have a service center on every street corner. And we do need the help from those other authorized service centers to work on MD helicopters, although we try to attract as many MDs into our network as possible. So we'll sell them the kit, and we will, like in most industries, MD will suggest an MSRP, a manufacturer's suggested retail price for that kit. Ultimately, we leave it up to the service centers to decide final pricing with the operators. And that's going to be based on a number of factors, including, are there any other parts that need to be replaced while they're doing this particular upgrade or surgery? Are there enhancements that need to be made? And for the assets that are coming off of the aircraft, what are those worth? So in the case of the 530N, the kit installed out the door, not including the engine, I'll come to that in a second, the MSRP for that is $350,000. And so then comes the cost of the engine, right? And so we're giving operators and service centers two different paths there. They can either buy a brand new engine from us, and that's going to run you in the neighborhood of, let's call it $800,000, or you can go with a reconditioned engine that you acquire or bring yourself. And those can be had out on the open market for, say, somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000. So if we go the recondition route, you've got $350 for the kit, $350 for the reconditioned engine, but your C20R core is arguably going to be worth around $200,000. So you're at $750 minus $250 or $200. So you're right around $550,000 for the upgrade to this aircraft. If you go the new engine route, you're at 800 plus 350, so $1,150,000. But take 200 off for that, and you're down below $1 million. So it's not cheap, and of course, aviation is not inexpensive, but you're getting a significant performance upgrade to your aircraft for a fraction of the price that you would pay for a brand new 530N if you were, to go buy one, and we happen to be making them. That's going to run you north of $3 million. So that's kind of the difference in the cost. You can be all the way down to 550 and get the performance of something that would cost you millions if you had to buy it brand new.
And what about AOG time? Essentially, have you guys kind of mapped out at this point how long it would take for a service center to complete the kit upgrade?
Yeah, that installation is, it's less than 200 man hours. So we have service centers that could flip this upgrade in a week.
Incredible.
Yeah, you're really just swapping out the engine, and you do change some things like the engine mounts and other things. But in the grand scheme of things, if you have a couple of technicians working on it, it's something you can knock out pretty quick. And not to jump ahead, but when we're talking the Super D, which may or may not include an engine upgrade, it depends if you want one, but also the rotating system upgrade and some changes to the tail. Again, that upgrade is less than it's less than 200 man hours to do I'll call it the upgrade less the engine, and then you throw less than 200 in for the engine, and those can be flipped in the matter of just a couple of weeks also.
Well, there might also be another way to save money, Ryan. It was a while back I saw on eBay is a 500 rotor head and main rotor head, and the listing for it said, I believe this goes on top of a helicopter, and they wanted $500 for it. So there's options.
We've been talking a lot about the law enforcement application of this aircraft, but there's a substantial interest from the general aviation market as well. Halsey, I'll start with you and then go to Ryan. Halsey, for you and in your line of work, are you seeing some interest in this platform or in the MD product as a whole? I would imagine a lot of the utility operators are looking specifically for these aircraft, but what are you seeing from a trending perspective in your line of work? Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. This March, you need to be at Verticon, the largest vertical aviation trade show and conference in the world. With over 15,000 attendees and all the major OEMs and suppliers, it's the place to be. Register today and save. Early bird prices end January 16th. Go to verticon.org.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. So at Helicopter, we haven't primarily been, say, a big reseller of used MDs, but lately, say this last year and a half, we've kind of become more of that. And so it's been an interesting market to be a part of. First and foremost, one of the biggest surprising things is, recently, I'm in dire need of a D model. So if anyone's listening to this podcast and you have a D model available, if it's online, I've seen it. So if it's not online, man, hit me up. Let me know. And Ryan, that goes for you too. If you have a D model, so please let me know. The D market's interesting. So, I guess really to go back to your original question is I've always seen MD from my perspective as a bit of the gold standard for a lot of the light utility work, especially say in the power line industry or the construction industry. I mean, it's been a proven workhorse for a long time. A lot of companies use them. A couple of years ago, a large operator of the D, went out of business, flooded the market with D and C model specifics, and that really drove price down on the used side. And what's crazy now is those prices in the D world, at least, have really rebounded. And that must be a testament to some of the things that you're doing, Ryan, because it's been shocking to me to see what the D prices are now looking like compared to, say, even about 2 years ago. And so to me, what that is telling me from my position is that, people are now starting to believe back in the product and the support. And I think prior to that, as we've talked about here on this podcast already, there was concern, right? The bankruptcy, the parts support, you name it, the list went on, and it was, like Ryan said, kind of, self-induced. And so, to see the market now really starting to inflate is a testament to the OEM. So, that's my perspective on it. Really need a D model. I don't know if I said that. So if anyone has a D model, please, let me know. But yeah, it's been interesting. The NOTAR specifically has been challenging for us. Straps have been difficult in the past. We had an aircraft AOG for a long time, the 600N, waiting on straps. I know that that's been kind of an industry-wide thing. I'm really interested to see, after this podcast and after more publicity, of what happens to the NOTAR used market now that it seems like MD is moving in a direction of more support and more excitement around the NOTAR. Because really the current language around it is some concern, right? People don't know if there's going to be that long-term support. And so from a resale aspect, I have 2 NOTARs for sale right now. I think that this actually helps me. I think MD, going out and supporting and publicly saying that they're willing to support the fleet specific to NOTAR, I think it's going to be really exciting. And now also give these 520 owners an option of doing what sounds to be a really cool upgrade. So that's my perspective on it.
Yeah. And we're seeing the same thing over the past several years. And this applies to, the 600N, the 520N, and the 900. A lot of those aircraft became more valuable as parts birds than they did as flyable aircraft. And if you were to run into a problem in which something on the aircraft timed out and you couldn't get a replacement, a lot of them would then just be parted out. And we have a customer in New Zealand, for example, who was really close to doing that. But then we announced the 530N, and there's a lot of cockpit upgrades you can get these days with Garmin products and other things. And that operator decided that they were going to have that aircraft restored. So that's underway right now, and we hope and we believe that a lot of these aircraft will be brought back, out of the barn, and with the availability of parts, they can be returned to service, which is it's good for everybody involved. And so, with the 530N, we believe that by eliminating, its hot and high limitations, we're hopeful that that will create a resurgence for the product by expanding its applicability. And if that happens, the demand grows for the product with only 85 or so of them out there in the world, it's conceivable that MD will restart 500N production as a 530N, which really won't be that difficult because all the NOTAR parts are flowing again. And there's so much commonality with today's, 530F that not that big of a deal. And so I don't think it's a stretch to think that that could happen in the not too distant future. And then real quickly on the D model thing, over the past couple of years, we've been seeing the value of those aircraft go up. And, D models, in good condition, they're commanding over $1 million these days. And so I kind of liken it going, take everything back to my automotive examples. It's like the classic car industry and the resto mod thing that's happening, right? So the late 60s and early 70s Camaros, they're just skyrocketing in value, not only because, people are interested in them, but because there's so many things you can do with them today to take that old vehicle and basically, put a modern drivetrain underneath of it, and you have the best of both worlds. And so that's part of the concept that we're working here with all of these fielded fleet upgrades.
I don't think that I've seen a bigger increase in demand, and specifically demand in what an aircraft will trade for, than I've seen in the D specific. I mean, that same D model that you're saying will sell for potentially $1 million or more now, I agree with you. 2 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, it's a $500,000 helicopter, maybe. Wow. Right? I mean, the increase is just absolutely insane. It's been really challenging actually for me to wrap my head around. I went on a hunt for a D just a few months ago thinking, $500,000, maybe 600,000. And, yeah, I've been shocked. I've been surprised. And it must be, along with other things, a testament to what you guys are doing and the confidence that you're giving the consumer, right? So I think as confidence continues to grow, we'll see, say the D and the E continue to do really well. But then we're going to see, potentially now confidence grow in the NOTAR. Because I agree. I think it's been a bit of a barn bird. I think it's been a bit of a stepchild. Those are a lot of those conversations we have. One thing that I found fascinating about the 500 that I wasn't familiar with is the windows. I don't know if a lot of operators have discussed that with you, but one of the things that we continue to hear about is like there isn't, I guess, the original window design. So if your aircraft has those windows on it, or I should say the windscreen, then there isn't really a retrofit. Have you guys heard about that, and are you guys addressing it?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the manufacturer. I've had this conversation with a lot of people, but on the pointy nose version of the 500 series, there was a high vis window that literally wrapped all the way around from the top to your feet, right? And that manufacturer, I'm told, is no longer making that glass. And so once you do that conversion on that nose, it becomes problematic to switch back. So in our, bag of tricks, the things that we're working, there's a lot of interest in us coming out with a pair of kits that will allow you to convert your round nose to a pointy nose or your pointy nose to a round nose. And, those two upgrades or kits are among the dozen or so that we're looking to release here in the not too distant future. It's funny, depends who you talk to, but it's like the Coke and Pepsi argument, right? Some people swear by the round nose and they say it maneuvers better, handles better, it's better in a crosswind because you're not getting the wind on the nose. Other people say the pointy nose is much better. Everybody has their personal preference. So we're going to take care of them all. And whether you want a round nose or a pointy nose, since we're muddying the water with the blades and the engines anyway, might as well let you have what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And Brian, to kind of go back to your automotive side there again, it's a lot of these options that they seem like the old automotive catalogs. It's a very modular approach that you guys are taking to these upgrades. Like you mentioned with the pointy nose. Okay, I want to take my my E model to a round nose, but I want this engine and I want to put these blades. I mean, is that a correct assessment of that modular look that you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when you used to get the Summit or the JEGS catalog in the mail, right? And you can go through it, and if you want, you can upgrade your chassis, and without doing the engine, or maybe you want to do the engine first, but if it's too powerful, you better do the rear axle or the transmission because you'll blow those up. And so it's kind of an a la carte type of concept that will allow you to go after it however you want to go after it. So let's say that you have a D model and you're in San Diego, right? So it's always 70 degrees F and weather's always perfect. You're not operating at altitude. If you have a D and you want some additional max gross weight capability, useful load capability, you don't need to do the engine upgrade. Keep your B in there and just do the airframe and the rotating system upgrade. But if you do want better performance and you're in hot and high conditions, then you do the engine along with the airframe. And there are people too that are asking, well, can I just get a C30 in my standard D or standard E? Because it's so much more cost effective to operate a C30 rather than a C20. And a bunch of, data there, and I can get into it if we need to. But, over the course of 10,000 hours, we've had one operator, his name was Richard Harris out of New Zealand, who shared with me that he spent $540,000 taking care of a C20 as opposed to, I think it was $140,000 to take care of a C30 over that same number of flight hours. So people are asking for that too. And since we already have the kits and basically the work instructions for how you do those upgrades, having a C30 in your standard D or your standard E is also on the short list of projects that we plan to release in the not too distant future.
It's interesting when you talk about that aircraft and the kind of catalog approach and the classic car approach that you described. Every time I talk to Dave Salem from Eagle West Helicopters, well, every time, but it seems like that. He's in Alpine, Wyoming, or some really cool place with a private owner who's got an MD product who's doing some private instruction for them. It seems like the MD products have really resonated in that industry. The private folks buying that aircraft. Are you seeing the same thing, Ryan, from your perspective?
Yeah, There are a lot of enthusiasts who fly the product, especially the older D models and the C models, because until just recently, they were more affordable. And like, for instance, there's also a UK flying every year, which we participate in. And there were, I guess, roughly 40 aircraft or so that showed up. There's only one F model in the UK. The rest of them are E's, D's, and C's. And there was only one commercial operator there. Everybody else of those 40 or so operators are just enthusiasts. And so, they're happy to hear about these, I'll call it lower cost upgrades that they can get by, for example, just doing the rotating system and the tail rotor gearbox extension and the vertical and the horizontal. You can take your useful load in a Super D20B from 3,000 max gross internal to 3,350. So for less than, after you sell your parts back, you do the trade with the service center, right? Like, let's say that you have blades on there that are at half life, and a vertical and a horizontal and a drive shaft, which you have to swap out. Those assets may be worth $100,000. So after you negotiate your price with the service center, you could be getting into a 350-pound increase in useful load for less than $250,000. So again, still not cheap, and we realize that, but bang for the buck, it's untouchable in this industry.
Yeah, it's really cool to see kind of that cult following that we talked about earlier take place, and those fly-ins. There's one in Wickenburg, right, in November, that's taking place. Are you guys going to be a part of that?
Yeah, well, we're tied up and we're not going to be part of that one, but we make an effort to get out now and go visit with customers and operators and go to these events so we can gather voice of the customer and hear what they're looking for, hear what their problems are, what their challenges are, what they'd like fixed. And we bring it all back here, and we'll prioritize it and work it in that order.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, since you're talking about it, John, and specific to the private sector. I think if I had the funds available today, I think an MD would definitely be an aircraft that I would want to own. Just from the pilot perspective, I think anyone that I've talked to is, it's the pilot's machine, right? In fact, I was selling a 407 a couple of years ago, and the guy's decision was between a 530F and the 407. And he told me that on the first call, ended up flying down to California for a showing anyway. I knew that I was kind of screwed. So, he ended up going in the 530 route. And so hard to compete, right? I think that there really is this love of flying. Something I find interesting, there's a very large and well-known character on social media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook now, that owns a 500. I'm curious, has there been any ripple effect to big name people like that now in this new age of marketing where there's influencers? This specific individual having a very large following and a very beautiful, 500 aircraft, has that been a ripple effect? Are you guys seeing anything at the factory of like, oh my gosh, the power of that kind of marketing is so valuable?
A little bit. I don't know that anybody's come in here and bought a brand new aircraft as a result of that, but you guys may have caught that about a year ago, that individual and one of his YouTuber buddies came out here with their posse, and they flew flight training. And then, later the person you're referring to had an old D model. No, actually it was an E model restored by one of our service centers. And so, with the addition of these fielded fleet upgrades, we believe that it's going to cause probably a rise in the price of the used car market out there, because now they can basically turn their D and E into an F model and do more with it. Even if you're just an enthusiast and you're out there, having fun flying it around, we think that these performance increases will be of interest to those folks.
Yeah, that pop culture influence, I think, is interesting. Go back to the 80s and you got Magnum PI, and you talk about the iconic helicopter that was portrayed just through that show alone. I grew up thinking that was what every helicopter should look like. So pretty interesting when you look at the role of pop culture as it pertains to aviation. I'd like to get into the Super D upgrades. Talk about what the concept is of that and how that's playing out. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Similar to the 530N, but goes a little bit beyond that. There's some differences between D and E models and F models. And namely, your main rotor blades are not as long. Your tail rotor gearbox is located closer to the aircraft rather than further away, which reduces leverage, tail rotor authority. Your tail rotor blades are shorter, and your vertical and horizontal stabilizers are a bit different, in addition to the fact that your engines offer less power and cannot operate in the same high conditions that a C30 can. So because we have this bag of tricks, basically people said, hey, you guys already have the E to F upgrade. You've had it for 20 years. What can you do with the D? And the short answer was, well, we can do everything with the D that we did with the E to F. And so what the Super D upgrade is comprised of two different things. There's I call it the airframe upgrade and then the engine upgrade. So with the airframe upgrade, basically you're switching to the F model main rotor blades. You don't have to touch the hub or anything else. We put the tail rotor gearbox extension on the aircraft and move it about 9 inches back. You'll need a longer tail rotor drive shaft for that. You get the F model tail rotor blades. You get a new vertical stabilizer and a new horizontal stabilizer. And that's what I'll call the rotating system or the airframe upgrade element. Then there's the engine if you want to do it. So it's kind of, a twofold piece. And the pricing for the airframe upgrade element of it is right at the same as it is for the 530N. $350,000 MSRP out the door, of course, subject to negotiation with your service center and based on the value of the parts that are coming off the aircraft. And you can do that with or without the engine upgrade. And let's say maybe you want to get some additional performance now. You're not sure if you need the engine upgrade, or maybe you don't have the money for the engine upgrade right now. Do the upgrade to the airframe and the rotating system. And then when you have those funds, you can, make some use from that right away, start working jobs that require more gross weight, or just, get more performance out of the aircraft if you're an enthusiast, and then come back when you have the funds to do the engine upgrade and take it to the next level. And, one of the things that it will allow D operators to do if they switch to the Super D30, it's effectively a D to F conversion, same as E to F, except you're taking a D to F, and it's identical except for the fact that you have a round nose. And so if you're operating in the mountains and you're doing jobs up there, the D model operators will tell you that with the C20B engine or even C20R, with the smaller, main rotor disc and tail rotor, they can't compete with F models in the higher elevations. Now this opens a new window for them. Now they can go compete for jobs at altitudes and temperatures that they couldn't compete with the F model for. So, again, people seem to be pretty excited about it. Utility operators, they'll be able to make use of it. Police departments are interested because it will give them some advantages, for a fraction of the cost of a new aircraft. They can, increase their range and increase the amount of stuff that they haul around, whether it be a FLIR ball or an MX-10, all that stuff adds up. And if you can carry more weight, all the better.
I think that's one of the challenging parts of public safety aviation is just what you brought up, all the mission equipment and how that all adds up from a weight perspective and limits you in what you can do. So having that availability for that upgrade, it's huge. Brent, you had an opportunity to go out and fly that as well before the restraining order was issued. Talk about what that was like.
Well, lifted before the C20R comes out. So again, my time is very limited in D models, but I did have the opportunity to fly some E and F models. Actually, before Ryan joined the company, when I would spend time at the factory doing it as part of the E to F upgrade program, and the D model that I flew, it was a Super D20B, and you again, with a limited comparison, the differences are they're very palpable. I mean, you're noticing your ability. I mean, again, it wasn't super. It was hotter actually than when we flew the 530N, and your limitations are what you're not seeing. You're not noticing that torque limitation or that TOT limitation onset as quick as you would into a maneuver. And again, like Ryan mentioned, the argument over the round nose, pointing nose, it almost becomes moot because the responsiveness that you're getting from the tail rotor, from that, correct me if I'm wrong, it's an 8-inch tail rotor extension on that gearbox, Ryan. and it's getting it further away from the tail rotor. So you notice that responsiveness of it even quicker. So even without the engine upgrade, it is very maneuverable. It'd been a while since I'd flown any MD product when I went to fly the D20B. And again, the familiarity was there, but also that we ran it through, Mike and Dennis and I ran through some maneuvers, and I tell you what, customers are going to be very pleased with it. They're gonna know, especially guys who are using the full capability of that, whether it be your utility operators, especially your lineman guys who need that tail rotor authority when they're working feet away from high tension power lines. And so those are the guys who are truly going to appreciate it. But a problem that you're creating here, Ryan, though, is you being a car guy. I know you can look at tail lights of a car down the road and tell you make, model, and year of that aircraft or that car. Well, you're creating problems for guys like Halsey here, because they're going to look at an aircraft. They go, I don't know if that's a D that's been converted to an F or an E that's been made into an N. You're in a great confusion in the identification market here.
Yeah,
I think it's that's a good problem.
Yeah, a very good problem.
We will offer vinyl decals that you can stick on your tail that say Super D30 or Super D20B. So, you can walk around and flash. Maybe we'll make some shirts and a necklace or something. Yeah, you just got a D model. I have a Super D30, good luck.
Owners and operators of helicopters are not shy to share opinions, especially with the OEM. Like you said, in New Zealand a couple of years back, sounded like it wasn't the most fun receiving line for you. What has been the overarching feedback in regards to the 530N and now the Super D? What is your feedback that you're hearing from the guys and the gals that are using these helicopters every day for commerce?
To be determined to some extent. And let me caveat that by saying we don't have any of the STCs yet. And like I said, for the Super D20B, we expect to get that STC any day at this point. And so we were hoping that we kind of opened up the phone lines to the service centers. And by the way, I should point this out too. Over the past 20 years, the only place you could have an E to F upgrade done was here at the factory for whatever reason. Well, we looked at that a couple of years ago and said, that's silly. We're not taking advantage of our global network to do these installations, because for a lot of people, it's simply cost or time prohibitive to ship your, E model from New Zealand over here. And, very expensive, takes forever, not for everybody. So we said, you know what? Why don't we open this up to the service center network? So that's what we've done. So, for not only E to S, but moving forward for all of the supers and other things that will come with it, you can take your aircraft to the MD authorized service centers and they'll do the installation for you. So, that was a change that we made to help with availability. Sorry, Halsey, take me back to that before I went off track there. What was the question?
Yeah, no problem. So I understand the STCs aren't out or finalized yet, but there has to be some response. Is there a level of excitement? I mean, to me, this all seems like it's very exciting. And then, as we talked about, now individuals specific to, say, operators in the utility environment, maybe they're operating at higher altitudes or they have more equipment, and maybe they were starting to think, hey, I need to get to a different platform because of this power constraint or that. Now with these new STCs on the horizon, has there been a lot of buzz in your circle from your owners, operators, about these?
Yes. And so we have already received orders for 530N kits, for Super D20B kits. I expected, before I went off on that tangent, I expected we would get more orders, but, I'll call it the consumer's defense, they're gun shy about, MD's performance, right? We promised a lot of things over the last 20 years. We even took some concepts to shows and we never ended up developing those. So they will tell us, listen, you're on the right track and we're very excited about these products, but you got to produce that STC before I'm going to send my helicopter to the garage and put it down. And it maybe doesn't come out for 2 months because you're waiting on the STC approval. So fair enough, right? I will say though that, we have gotten ahead of it with, a couple of upgrades. And although those aircraft are not flying yet, and I can't go into the details here, we have an operator in the Southeast who performs a utility type of function. And they're so excited about the performance of the Super D20B. They operate a dozen aircraft. They've already said that they want to upgrade all dozen aircraft as quickly as possible for the additional capability. So we're hopeful that, once these, start being delivered, as soon as we get the STCs and they can leave their service centers and they get out there in the world and word starts to get around and social media, back to your point about the impact of that, about the performance improvements that these kits offer, that we're hopeful it's going to take off like wildfire. And going back to the 530N, if demand is such that it causes used aircraft prices to go up so much, it turns into a supply and demand issue, right? And then people are going to say, I got to have more MDs. And maybe they start coming back to the factory saying, you know what, I'm going to do some upgrades, but I also want to buy a couple of new ones. So let's get that rolling.
Like Halsey said, that all these upgrades are really exciting, and on our earlier conversation, you talked about kind of your desire to push the product line beyond where it's currently at. Can you tease, to the ability you can, some of the ideas that you're referencing?
Just to run down the short list, and most of these will be available by the end of Q1, we have 3 Super D upgrades, including the Super D30, which is effectively a D model to an F model upgrade. And even with the engine, you're going to have an F model for less than $1 million compared to a brand new one that's going to cost you several million, right? So we have 2 Super E's. That'll be the Super E20B and the Super E20R. Those are expected to be available in Q1 of next year. The E to F upgrade, and that's been available for 20 years. The C30 upgrade for the standard D and the standard E, depending on where that one falls in the list of priorities, that will be an early next year type of project too. We talked about the kits for the round nose to pointy nose and pointy nose to round nose. And we're actively evaluating the timing and cost associated with an upgrade that would increase the 500 series max gross weight from 3,350 internal and 3,750 external to as high as 4,000 pounds internal and 4,400 pounds external. Which would give operators the power of a Bell 206 L4 Long Ranger in an aircraft that's a fraction of the size. Just to use one number, the main rotor diameter of the 206 L4 is 37 feet. The main rotor diameter of the MD 530 is 27 feet. So it gives you, especially when you're operating in, out in the woods and doing utility operations, you can put that aircraft into a lot of places that you can't put other aircraft. And now it has as much lifting power as something that, is in a different league.
Yeah, that's super exciting, for the utility workers in particular. And think about some of the programs that are using those helicopters in the public safety realm. What that might mean for them as well is exciting. On the public safety side, any way to tease some of the ideas that are coming down the pipes for product line expansion?
As always, a special thanks to HeliCASTS for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, HeliCASTS is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. HeliCASTS' team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, HeliCASTS will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text helicopter to 1-855-HELICOPTER. That's helicopter to 1-855-735-5226. And a HeliCASTS pilot agent will reach out. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.
Well, so, that same upgrade would apply to police departments, for example. And, they've expressed interest in having more useful load capability so they can carry more mission equipment, and it just expands their windows of operations. So, we believe it'll be applicable to those guys too. We talked about max gross weight increases. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff. Now that particular project is probably going to be a 16-month project. So that's probably not something anybody's going to see out the door in 2026, but it could and should be a 2027 offering, both in kit form and again, if we come out with something like that in the short light single, frame, there's probably going to be new aircraft demand too. A couple of years ago, you guys are probably aware that we were exploring, the possibility of a long light single aircraft, basically, a stretched version of the 500. And we were even considering a carbon fiber fuselage to reduce weight, increase power. We were going to take the same approach that Bell did with the 505, and that is take the same great proven drivetrain out of the 530F and just, put it on a bigger cockpit, maybe with a bigger engine. Of course, we have other options there too, with, more blades in the main rotors, such as used to be on the, and still is on the 600N. So we've kind of set that one aside for now. It's not in the cards based on where we are at this point in time with the company, but things are going quite well again. And, again, focused on the aftermarket, building new aircraft to order, and we're looking forward and hope to get a lot of better things going here.
Awesome.
One of the things that I love about our industry shows that we have, say European Rotors or VAI, is the ability to connect directly with the OEMs and see what's happening. Can we expect MD to be present at shows this year? And what kind of messaging are you guys pushing out to the general helicopter population, say this next 12 months?
Yes, we'll be at all the big shows. VAI, Verticon, HAI. We almost always attend Quad A, the Army Aviation Show in May. We are almost always at APSCON. We haven't gone to AUSA the past few years. I'm not sure how far back that goes, but maybe that's one we want to go to, because we do sell a military variant of the 530F. We delivered 6 brand new units to Jordan as recently as a year ago, and they sent their 6 training aircraft back here to do a full glass cockpit upgrade. So I didn't mention that one earlier, but we are also coming out with, and we've done 7 of them so far. You can upgrade your F model analog aircraft to a full-blown glass cockpit that we have today, which is the Garmins and the Howells. And so that same upgrade can also be applied to the E and the F. It will probably only be applicable to military operators and law enforcement, because it's pretty pricey. And with the lower cost Garmin solutions out there, a lot of people will choose to go with that. But cockpit upgrades are the same. So, and we're also, in addition to the regular shows, for example, Barrett-Jackson for the first time had their fall auction here just last week. And so we were at Barrett-Jackson, which is, in our backyard, just over in Scottsdale, just to build brand awareness. And there were a couple people there with D models who learned that there's the Super D coming out, so they're interested. We plan to be back at that auction, the big one in January, again, to build brand awareness and possibly sell some new aircraft to, the type of enthusiasts that you see in the automotive industry, who will buy a number of cars at, well north of, 7 figures, and maybe they would like an MD in their garage. And so I think you'll see a little more of us in the coming year out and about at events.
Ryan, when those orders inevitably start rolling in, and once I and Halsey hit our power loan winnings and we get our 530F orders in, how's the capacity of the factory to get aircraft out the door? Where are we looking there? Because obviously things went back during bankruptcy, probably some employees weren't around anymore, and you had to get things spooled back up. So what does production capacity look like now?
Yeah, right now we're supply constrained. And so we generally quote people around 12 months lead time, but we do have several aircraft going down the line right now that are available for sale. But, it's generally 12 months. And, among the challenges that we're all experiencing in this industry are, supply chain challenges, and not knocking any of our suppliers, but raw materials too. For example, bearings have been a complete nightmare for everybody in the industry, from the people who provide bearings for us for our rotating systems to the bearings that Rolls-Royce, who supplies our engines, that they buy. They're just incredibly hard to get. The raw material shortage was affected by, the war between Ukraine and Russia. And so that's been a problem. So for us, and everybody will also tell you that getting castings is a problem too. And our main rotor gearbox, for example, is cast out of magnesium. So there are only a handful of magnesium casting houses in all of the US. So everybody's experiencing these same challenges. There's limited supply, there's growing demand. So in short, it's about 12 months unless you want to pick up one of the several that are running down the line right now.
It's always interesting to me to talk about the supply chain and how geopolitical issues affect that. We don't often consider that, right? Like you talked about Russia and Ukraine, how that impacts global supply. Really interesting. But as we sort of wrap up here, there's two questions I want to ask. And the first is, as it pertains to the industry as a whole, I think we've got some headwinds we're facing. Recruitment and retention is a big issue, whether it's on the technician side, the pilot side, or really anywhere in the industry. That supply issue that we just talked about is a major issue. From your perspective as a CEO, what are some of the major headwinds we face as a helicopter industry, and how do we kind of get over that?
The two biggies right now are supply chain and FAA or resources, and those affect our ability to move fast. So everybody's working those, going out looking for alternative sources of supply, working between amongst ourselves to try and work together to make sure that resources are available. In terms of the future of rotorcraft, I'm not sure if you were going here, but how do we see that evolving? How is that going to affect rotorcraft? I think a couple of things there. As seen in other industries, safety, performance, and sustainability are usually improved as solutions and the cost of solutions trickle down from the more expensive models in the military variants. So there's always going to be some of that going on. And then our ability as manufacturers and suppliers to develop those technologies and those widgets and get the FAA to bless them, we'll incorporate more of that into aircraft, rotorcraft, make them safer to operate, easier to sustain, that kind of thing. I think we all believe that, to some extent, some rotorcraft missions will be replaced by drones in the near future. For example, surveillance missions, those are arguably ripe for being replaced by drones. But then fast forward another 20 years, and you're probably going to have an array of satellites that replace drones for surveillance, right? So it's always changing. However, I believe, and I think the rotorcraft industry believes, there are missions that will most certainly always be flown, by manned rotorcraft, in particular, those that require people, like air ambulance and military missions that require the insertion of troops. So, I don't think that the unmanned aircraft is going to replace the manned aircraft anytime soon. And I think rotorcraft will be around for many, many, many years to come.
The law enforcement industry in particular, I feel like the relationship between manned and unmanned is complementary. The unmanned systems can do what the manned can't, and vice versa. So it's been interesting to see that develop and the mindset change from an adversarial relationship and I'm afraid of what this might do to my job type thought process to actually complement each other as we sit today. So that's a really interesting conversation. The last question I'll ask before we slip out is, your vision for MD as we go forward. You've talked about a lot of different steps you guys are implementing to improve MD and where we are today. Where do you see MD tomorrow and ongoing?
The year after next, 2027, MD will be 80 years old. We started as Hughes Helicopters in 1947. So we have a long history like many of the other rotorcraft manufacturers. Our vision is to be around for another 80 years and continue to be known as the hot rod of the skies. And so I think that's really the theme that we're doubling down on right now. It's often been said that we're the Ferrari of the skies. I like to change that paradigm a little bit. We're the Shelby AC Cobra of the skies. And so, well, if you guys know anything about, Carroll Shelby and Shelby America and that history, or if you've watched the movie Ford versus Ferrari, it was just an amazing story, right? And some of the, the YouTube videos that you'll see, interviews of Carroll, he'll say, I think in large part, our success was due to the people on the team. We would routinely have team members stay until 3 a.m, and they'd be back at 7 a.m. going after it again. And they developed, kind of a series of cars in the AC Shelby Cobra that went out and just destroyed the Corvettes around the racetrack. And, they offered a series of engines, right? At first, I think it was the 260, and then I want to say the 283, and then eventually the 427. So we're kind of going down the same path. And, we'd like to build that kind of a company here, real enthusiast, and most people in the industry are, and, really make use of some of the technology that we've inherited over the years from those that came before us.
Yeah, that passion for the industry that you talk about is rich. Halsey, I know you've got a limited time. Any closing thoughts before we wrap out?
Great podcast. I think if this doesn't fire you up about MD, then I don't know what will. This is exciting. As someone that is a helicopter dork, a nerd, all the names, again, this brand is important to this industry, and it's been up and down this last few years, and getting to have this conversation with you today, Ryan, has instilled a lot more confidence in me in MD. I think the right person in the right position then can assemble the right team to execute. And it seems like your vision is clear. I think when it comes to these STCs, especially thinking on the Super D, I think it's going to go gangbusters. I really do. And so I'm excited to have this conversation. I hope to be an MD owner at some point. Happy to work out any deals with you, of course. But yeah, no, appreciate your time and really, really special. And I look forward to meeting you at the shows and getting to build a relationship and a better relationship with you at MD.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much. And again, you're all welcome to come out anytime you want and take some flights with our pilots.
Halsey needs supervision. I'll just let you know that.
I'm the best behaved one here. You know that, John.
Brent, any closing thoughts?
No, I would just I would hinge off what Halsey said that the future of the company and the recognizing of this of the almost cult following of it, and I think one of the most important first steps was the address of that recognizing the people who've made this company what it is, and that's your customers that are out there. And you guys have taken huge steps. I've been lucky enough to be along and watch that firsthand and hear from some of those customers, even those ones still to this day in New Zealand that I know personally. And they have mentioned the absolute turnaround in the support side of it. And I think if that continues, which I have no doubt that it will, into with the upgrade program you guys have firmly set in place now, along with the future production of new aircraft, I think there's no doubt for any of us, especially those of us who learn to fly on this, and this manufacturer is dear to our heart. There's definitely going to be another 80 years. And along your Shelby thing, those Shelbys were worth more money if Carol signed them. So Ryan, get your pen ready. You're going to be busy.
Yeah. Got a long way to go there, but you're right. I was thinking the other day, if you had the funds back in the 60s and you were to put a half a dozen of those cars in the garage, you could turn around and flip them for $10 million today.
Yep. Halsey's going to have a garage full of MD helicopters here pretty soon.
Hey, I'll take it.
Not to delay things, but there is a bit of that's been going on the past 5 to 10 years, because as we've been very challenged about getting spare parts out there are people that have been buying aircraft and buying parts and just hoarding them, because
100%.
As our service center council told us about a year ago, listen, guys, the only way to work yourself out of this problem is to make what those guys think are gold bars, basically worthless. We even talk to some of these operators and say, I've heard that you have 5 million rotor hubs sitting in your shed. Would you be willing to sell them back to us for a core charge? Because we're building up, our exchange pool, our rotable pool. I know, nope, can't do it. They have to pay me $80,000. And like, that's like the price of an overhaul one. What are you guys talking about? So yeah, we still have a lot of dragons to slay, but most will say that we've made a lot of progress in the last few years, and more to come.
Well, Ryan, it's been an honor and a privilege to talk to you. Thank you again for taking time out of your day. You've got a lot on your plate, and I know that stepping aside to talk with us for 2 hours is a challenge. So thank you for doing that. Very inspiring to hear your career progression, to hear where you've taken the company, and just look forward to seeing where we go from here. It's got this upward trajectory, and I'm excited to see that continue. So until we get to say hi in person at either Verticon or European Rotors or someone else, we'll catch you later. Thanks a lot.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ryan.
See you guys.
Please stay tuned for a final word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. This March, you need to be at Verticon, the largest vertical aviation trade show and conference in the world. With over 15,000 attendees and all the major OEMs and suppliers, it's the place to be. Register today and save. Early bird prices end January 16th. Go to verticon.org. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
As always, a special thanks to HeliCASTS for producing this podcast. Specializing in helicopter evaluations, faster sales, and superb service, HeliCASTS is the go-to agency for clients expecting immediate results. HeliCASTS' team of helicopter professionals are the best in the business. Using their aviation expertise, a nationwide network, and a proprietary 76-step listing strategy, HeliCASTS will convert your listing from Mayday to payday. Ready to get started? Text HeliCASTS to 1-855-HeliCASTS. That's HeliCASTS to 1-855-735-5226. And a HeliCASTS pilot agent will reach out. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.